Okay, well, we've got some great news. It's another edition of Come Together. That's right. We want everybody to come together, everybody in the world, in this country and every country. Yeah, well, you could say it's rather idealistic, but it's good to have ideals. And of course, I'm here with my good friend and partner and co-host, Tom Gallagher. How we doing, Tom?
We're busy, but we're hanging in there.
Yeah, well, I like your shirt because it says hello. It could have said goodbye, right? It says hello, so that's very positive. It kind of, and of course, we have our special guest today, Phoebe Lorde. Hi, Phoebe.
Hello, how are you doing today, Brooke?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely wonderful. It's very nice to meet you and have you on the show.
Oh, same to you, and same to you, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so Phoebe, I love the name of your podcast, Another Kind of Mind. Now
Mm.
tell me, my dear, how did you come up with that?
Well, first of all, the obvious, it's taken from Got to Get You Into My Life. And it just seemed like a nice way to telegraph, this is a different type of Beatles podcast, so it will be coming to you um via voices that you don't normally hear on Beatles, podcast radio. And also we'll have viewpoints that you probably haven't heard before.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to say that I absolutely love the title because I know that am definitely another kind of mind. I mean, there's no question. And I take pride in saying that and being that way. And when I think of John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and I think of Brian Epstein, and I think of George Martin, I'm going, wow, you know what? John Lennon, absolutely. It was absolutely another kind of mind. I mean, there was no one had a mind like John Lennon, on the planet, as far as I know. And I've met a lot of people, but I think you probably would agree with me and Tom as well that John definitely was one who had another kind of mind. So Paul McCartney, definitely another kind of mind. George Harrison, another kind of mind. Ringo, another kind of mind. So when you put the four another kind of minds together, which of course is the unique chemistry of the Beatles, it couldn't have been Pete Best. That was the problem. He was not another kind of mind.
Yeah.
He was a friend, of course, and his mom had the Casbah, and that was one of the reasons why John and Paul wanted him to be in the band because that was one of their first gigs, was playing at the Casbah in their mother's cellar.
Mm-hmm.
But another kind of mind. George Martin, for sure, had another kind of mind because he was a producer of comedy records. Plus, he was a symphonic player. He played the oboe, so he was definitely another kind of mind. Do you think that Brian Epstein was another kind of mind or no?
I mean, I think he was certainly the right kind of mind for the Beatles and fit in really well with them and was exactly what they needed. So yeah, to the extent that they're all another kind of mind, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I guess you could replace another kind of mind with a different kind of mind if you put a different in there.
Yeah.
Brian Epstein, he was a furniture salesman. He was not a musician. He was a businessman, sure. But then eventually, when he got to the record shop with NEMS and all that, then that was a whole other situation.
But a creative person who had vision.
Oh, no doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt. He said long time ago, back in, I think, 65, he said, in the year 2000 or 50 years from now or whatever the day was, I forget the date, that people will be listening to the Beatles. And
Right.
amen, amen. You know, I mean, here we are.
Absolutely.
You know, here we are. We're talking about what else? The Beatles, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, what is it about you, Phoebe, that, what is it about you and the Beatles? I mean, you know, why are you here today with us, for instance? What is it that happened, and what would you like to share with us in terms of your own personal experience with the Beatles, please?
Well, I would say that it it all started probably the way in a very typical way that it does for most young people, um, which is through the music. And it was about the age of 12 or 13, which I think also, anecdotally talking to people is also a pretty common age, um, to get really into the Beatles. I'd always been a fan of music throughout my life, and like especially pop and rock and roll and whatever's on the radio and stuff. But that age, like 11, 12, 13, like junior high age, was when I really started to hyper focus on certain types of music and really started music collecting. I'm a huge music collector, vinyl enthusiast. I have a whole house, a whole house. I have a whole room in my house that's just dedicated to records and music, and like a lot of us. But yeah, so I really started that around that age, and my first love was 60s music. And obviously at the epicenter of 60s music is the Beatles, and they're very easy to fall in love with because they're awesome and their catalog is amazing and vast and varied, and like everybody likes the Beatles. But in addition to that, they're magnetic, for all the reasons that we all love them. They're
Yeah, yeah,
funny,
sure,
they're,
sure.
they're
Yeah,
wise and
but
quick-witted and all that sort of stuff.
yeah, but what was the first song that you heard by the Beatles when you were a teenager?
That really pulled me in, other than just things that I'd grown up with?
Yeah, the first song that you went, oh my God, listen to that.
That's a great question. I don't think there was really a
Was it a hit
song.
song? No? Oh,
No, I don't think so. I think it was just a sort of a slow recognition of like, oh, that's the Beatles. Oh, that's the Beatles too.
hmm,
But the first album that I got that I sort of played throughout was Sergeant Pepper.
Pepper.
So yeah,
Okay.
so Sergeant Pepper was definitely that's when I went down into the rabbit hole and knew I was never coming back out.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a hell of an album for your first
Yeah.
the Beatles. My God. Because, of course, as we know, there's nothing ever like Pepper again. And even at the time, it was like nothing that the Beatles had done before or after. So it was this sort of thing that happened once, and of course, it just changed everything in the recording industry and everything else. And what they were doing in the studio at that time was groundbreaking and pioneering and et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, so Sergeant Pepper,
Yeah. It's
is
such a
there,
beautiful, it's still my favorite Beatles album, probably. Like if
oh,
I'm
is it?
pressed, that's what I
Oh, is
would
it?
say. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, to
okay.
me, it's just so beautiful. It's so complete. And I'll just never forget the experience of listening to it on my headphones from start to finish. It was just such an experience. And I felt like, I don't know, like it was just this little universe that I was sucked into. It's not the type of, you don't go to the gym with Sergeant Pepper, like it's very sort of immersive, kind of
Yeah,
mentally, and
yeah, yeah,
so really like took me someplace. And
yeah,
I'd never heard an album like that before.
exactly. Yeah. So, of course, you listened to it with your headphones on and you were listening to the stereo version, I hope.
Yeah, it was actually it was a CD.
Yeah, okay, so more than like, yeah, it was stereo because
Yeah.
what they did with stereo on Pepper, it was a trip. It was actually, the Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club and audio trip. They took you on to a different place. They took you on a journey to another place, and you went there, which you and of course millions of other people. And I went there when it first came out. It came out
Wow.
June 1st, 1967, and I got it at the record shop on June 2nd because that was my girlfriend's birthday. And we went to her home and put it on the hi-fi, and I was never the same.
Yeah, I
Again, it's
understand.
a sort of life-changing experience.
Yeah.
Listening to that. I mean, every track, and then of course ending it with a day in the life. I mean, there's no adjectives to describe that masterpiece.
Yeah.
So that's a very exciting entree for you. Was there any one particular song on Pepper that knocked your socks off, or was just sort of the entirety of the whole LP?
Yeah, I think it's the whole thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because I did sort of, like I said, view it as kind of an experience. I mean, I wouldn't, and yeah, I had it on a cassette tape, so I would listen to it on a cassette tape.
Oh, you had a cassette. Wow.
Yeah, well, I was recorded from a CD,
Oh, I
if that
see.
makes sense. Yeah, so I had taped it
Yeah,
off
yeah,
of a CD. But so that I wasn't fast forwarding. I mean, there was no skipping. It was I would play it from start to finish, like
yeah.
a movie, like I was watching a movie.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it was just like there's it kind of has the beats of a movie as well. So
Yes, it does.
yeah.
Unfortunately, the movie Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club did come out in 1970. I want to say
Eight.
eight.
Yeah,
Yeah,
77,
yeah,
78.
78. And boy, it was really a shame that they didn't just follow the LP, because the LP, as you said, the LP was the treatment for a movie. If
Yeah.
they just simply did that, but of course they didn't, and it was one of the worst movies ever made, even though they had some very, very big names in that movie. Okay, Tom, would you like to join us? Please come in.
Yeah, thank you. So, Phoebe, when we talked, I want to thank you. I'm a big fan of yours.
Yay.
I love your podcast. I'm going to be honest with
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Okay, so I listened to this. Like me and Brooke, we did this ARP with podcast. It's just a limited thing.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that there was this world of podcasts out there where all these people were doing Beatle podcasts. So I'm listening to people. I listened to yours and I was like, I think I'm going to delete this. And I know, and I'm serious. And I deleted it. And I said, why is it that I'm not welcoming like a woman's voice? And why am I not welcoming someone who's younger? And it wasn't that the quality of your production was bad. It was that you jarred me. You made it where, we're not like a middle-aged, New York voice accent guy that's, talking about the Beatles. So, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I need to go back. So I pulled you back on. And then I'm like, okay, now I get it. And I don't know why there's not more women, because women made the Beatles. It's not guys that made the Beatles, it's women. So I don't know why there's not more podcasts that feature women. And I like you guys. You're very fresh. Like your view, you go in very different directions, very conversational, and dig it. So I just want to thank you, and I tell you that my journey about how I listen to you guys.
Well,
The
thank you.
one thing
I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's fascinating. Please
you're
continue.
you did you're at first I was like, oh my God, you're by monthly, so it takes a while for you guys to get your stuff out because I'm like ready. I'm ready for my Beatle fix. But you're on this one with Sam White, Wiles, Paul or Nothing. You two had a blast with the chaos and creation discussion, and you went off about Paul and the world of Paul and stuff. And I wanted to bring up how that I have a thought that I've never talked to in podcasting is that
Oh.
if you look at Paul in
Mhm.
1969
Mhm.
with a Get Back movie, he is like People Magazine's the prettiest guy in the world. But when you look in the 70s, like he cuts his hair that's all jacked up with the mullet. His clothes looks like, pieces of scraps like all woven together. He's very desexualized, and I think that's done on a purpose. And when he becomes like sexual in his lyrics, they come really off-putting because you're not used to it. It's kind of weird. Like he pulled himself out of that, where maybe John Lennon can be sexual in his lyrics, and so could Mick Jagger, and so many other people, and it's understandable. But it feels weird when he does it. So this is what my thought of mine from that chaos and creation, which you guys went off on tangents, and then I wanted to go in a tangent with you.
Interesting. That is definitely a hot take. So there's a couple of different threads there. So one would be his outward appearance. What you were talking about with his haircuts and his fashion and stuff like that. Now, I just want to start by saying that the obvious, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, and it is the 70s.
It is. Personally, in many ways, I find him much more attractive in the 70s than I do in the 60s even, especially like it is younger, like pre-Pepper, when he's
The mop top.
He grew into his looks.
Very young and very
Yeah.
clean
Yeah.
and clean cut, and maybe I like a little more shaggy of a look or something. But I definitely feel like he has more of this can also get into like whether 70s fashion, whether it triggers you in a good way or a bad way. And, I feel like sometimes that can be related to your personal experience. And sometimes if you don't have a personal experience attached to it, then it can just be about fashion and doesn't necessarily mind you of like your kindergarten teacher or, whatever, or your grandma or whatever, whoever was wearing that fashion that you remember seeing pictures of or.
You know where the take came from? It came from reading the Beatles legacy book, where women weren't allowed in the studio. And and I was a kid. I'm from the 70s, so when I saw Paul, I'm like, oh, it's Wings. I love Paul. I didn't think of anything. I'm just looking at it through that lens now, going backwards, where he's trying to be a family man, and he's trying to be
He was a family man.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
He's the most famous person. Yeah, and that he would purposely tone his look down, the hotness factor, and the lyrics would be less sexualized because of he's a family guy. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, but I'm not sure because I know, putting on my woman who is attracted to men hat, that's sexy. Like a young dad, young dad vibes are actually pretty sexy. And I would say that most women who like men do find that attractive. So, especially if you're good looking enough and, relatively young enough or whatever, like a young dad in his early 30s who's still very sexually available, whatever, being committed and being around your wife and your kids all the time is kind of hot because women are attracted to men who make good mates.
Men who are committed.
Yeah, or yes, exactly. Or at least have that appearance.
As we know, McCartney insisted that when he went on touring with Wings, that's why Linda was in the band, because he wanted his family to be with him. He wanted his wife to be with him, which was very controversial at the time. And he got chewed up and spit out by the critics because Linda, let's face it, she's a talented photographer, but she couldn't play anything. So Paul, taught her a few things on the keyboard, and the critics are going, oh, wait a minute now. she's not even a musician, and here he is, he's got his wife and the band and they're touring, and she had to put up with a lot of stuff, but that's the way he wanted it, and she, of course, she obliged. Now, the other thing that is interesting when you guys were talking about the sexual innuendos of perhaps some of the lyrics. Now, being a family man and all, okay, so in 1972, now at that time, Paul was with Linda, of course, because they were married, and they had Linda's first child from her first marriage. And he came out with the single, High, High, High. And let me tell you, High, High, High. Oh, get ready for my body gun. I'm going to, I mean, it was, at least my interpretation was, I mean, get ready for my body gun. What's a body gun? I mean, use your imagination. So he was, he was hot to trot. I mean, even though he was a family man, he's a creative artist, and he thought, well, and we're going to, high, high, high. Well, what is he talking about? Well, God knows, and we all know that he was, shall we say, very fond of the weed. So as a matter of fact, High, 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 if I recall correctly, was banned, I think, on the BBC, if I recall correctly.
He had like 3 banned singles that year or something. He was like, that was banned. Give Ireland Back to the Irish. It was like 2, and I think there might have been one more, like in the span of 6 months or something.
Yeah. And of course, the situation is that when you're dealing or talking about a musical genius with such a range and a scope and his creativity, and he's coming up with this stuff, and he's like, well, I'm Paul McCartney, so I wrote this song with my band Wings. Well, and he puts it out, of course, because he can do anything he wanted to do back then, and he still can. But there was backlash. And there were some other songs that had sexual innuendos with them as well. John, well, that's a whole other story, with his set of lyrics. But anyhow, so I just wanted to interject that as we were talking about that subject.
I want to rebuttal all this. When we were kids in the 70s, because I'm working on my hot take.
Yeah.
When we were in the 70s, I would read like the Cream magazine or the musician magazines, and it would always feature like musicians and them on the road and the crazy stuff that they did, and Led Zeppelin, The Who, like, so when you look back at the 70s, like Paul is not in that group of like a rebel rouser kind of tearing up the hotel rooms, and I have girls who are 14 years old or that are like now my slave. Like, so I mean, I'm just saying, like, when you look back at the 2 versions, like he's in another room with his wife and everyone else is being like, he's moving crazy. And that's where I'm looking at it as like he looks very tame compared to like a Mick Jagger or something from
he does. And he does, just to circle back to this for a second. So you guys are talking about like he got so much pushback for it, and he got, raked over the coals for not being cool and stuff. And I agree with you, but who was giving all of that pushback? Was it
critics?
But was it women? Were women giving that pushback? And the reason I'm asking that is because, and this isn't to like, I'm not trying to correct you or argue with your perspective, but I'm just saying that's a man's perspective. That is all men having discussions with other men about what they find sexy in men. I'm not kidding. That is not a woman's perspective. Women were not out there going, oh, Paul McCartney is so gross now that he has a wife. And do you know what I mean? Like, they were, I'm sure people, women still, I've seen footage. Women still found him sexy. They still showed
definitely.
up. They were still buying his records.
Sure.
It was the guys. It was the dude bros with the record collections, writing the reviews, who are the ones who had such a problem with Paul not being sexy enough anymore, and not wearing the right clothes and not singing this and that. And I don't think he cared, and I don't think any women cared, frankly.
Well, let me ask you the question, Phoebe. When you hear the lyric "body gun," what Does that conjure up any particular type of an image or no?
Well, no, it's Polygon. Um, I guess it sounded like Body Gun, but the original lyric is Polygon, which I like actually kind of. I like it a lot more than Body Gun. I don't think is. I mean, it's not original or unique in any way. It's like, my sausage or my sword or it's
And
just
you
kind of
thought,
trite. But like Polygon sounds kind of perverted and weird, and so I like Polygon a lot more.
okay,
It doesn't
okay,
like you don't even
Polygon,
really know what it means. Like,
and he talks about his banana as well.
yeah,
So I think we should, at this point, segue into something which I'd like to discuss with you, Phoebe,
yes,
is the Beatles and their women,
sure.
because that's a pretty, I think, fascinating category, because there's so many women involved, with the Beatles. So, any thoughts on the
On
Beatles and their
women in
women?
general.
Well, no, the Beatles and their women. Yeah, any thoughts on any of them?
I mean, yeah, lots of thoughts. Is there someone in particular that you're
No, you pick and choose. I mean, I've got my list, but you pick and choose.
I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you that there's lots of interesting women in the Beatles story. I mean, for better or worse, the most prominent ones are their wives. I mean, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of women on the creative side. Or even really so much in the management or administration of the Beatles, although it's a very, very small group. It's like Brian and like two secretaries or whatever. It's a very tight
Neil
group there.
Aspinall, Derek Taylor. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but like even all the other people at EMI, Sir Joseph Lockwood and Dick
Oh,
James and like all the major players are men. So,
right, right. Yeah.
um,
No, but
yeah.
getting back to the women, you say creativity. We have to acknowledge Linda because she certainly was creative with her camera. But then also, prior to Linda, Jane Asher was extremely creative because she was a successful stage actress.
Oh yeah. Well, of course. Well, the Beatles dated, especially John and Paul, they dated artists. I mean, they're artists. It's not shocking that they would also partner and date artists. I mean, Cynthia Lennon, don't forget, is it actually a fantastic artist. Um, if you haven't seen her like two-dimensional artwork, it's very, very good. I mean, I
Mhm.
would venture to say it's better than John's. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean,
noodling, John's
y
doodles, and doodles. Yeah,
yeah, not accounting for taste. Obviously everybody's taste is different, but and I haven't
well,
seen her paintings, for instance, but yeah, seeing her like drawings,
mhm.
very, very talented.
Well, they met at the Liverpool Art School. I mean, that's how, two artists
Exactly.
meeting together at the Liverpool Art Institute. That's how it all began. So yeah, artist to artist. So the creativity, as we're talking about, and the relationships. Now, of course, Patty Boyd, creative because she was, well, a model
Yeah.
and somewhat of an actress. I mean, she did, she had one line in A Hard Day's Night, and I don't know, quite frankly, if she after that. I'm not that familiar with her acting career, but I know she was a model, you know.
Yeah.
And but then Maureen Starkey or Maureen Cox, because that was her maiden name. I think that Maureen wanted to I think she wanted to start her own hair salon or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's just fascinating to me, when you look at these women, because let's face it, the Beatles could have, and they did have, they could have gotten any woman that they wanted at that time, and they did. But it's just fascinating to me to see, especially with, like, for instance, Paul and Jane. and how unfortunately, that went by the wayside. And I have my own interpretation as to why that happened. And of course, with John and Cynthia, well, we know what happened there. That's a a pretty obvious story. And with George and with Patty, we know what happened there as well, i.e., Eric Clapton. So there's all these triangles that came into the mix, and Maureen and Ringo. I know that in the 70s it was actually an absolute mess with the Beatles and their women. I don't know if you know the stories that were going on, but I think they're quite true. Between George and Maureen,
Yeah.
they were a hot item. And Patty's running off with Ron Wood. It was just really, it was pandemonium as far as I was concerned. So you start off, you got your loving relationships, you get married, and then things change.
It seems like the 70s, excuse me for interrupting, but
no, please.
yeah, it definitely seems like the 70s were a hard time for, I mean, obviously a lot of people. I mean, in some ways, the whole generation, and obviously there's lots of reasons for that, Vietnam War and the economy and all that kind of stuff. But I just obviously just speaking from an American perspective, but for all the rock stars in the 60s, I mean, a lot of them didn't make it. It was a bad time. And I think all the Beatles too had like the aftershocks of Beatlemania that they were still processing. Ringo had a very hard time in the 70s, but yeah, especially the late 70s.
Oh yeah, well, he was an alcoholic and a pill addict. Yeah.
Yeah. And George struggled a lot as well.
Yeah, George struggled a lot, but as we're talking about the 70s and all the the swapping, if you will, that was going on, Paul, nope. Once he married Linda, as far as I know, he was locked down. He was one of the few, while George and Ringo and John was a different situation. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
That Paul was the exception. And Paul.
Well,
Paul,
I mean, I think he struggled as well, but I think he presents his struggles much, much differently. And he also, I mean, I think one of the major ways that he copes is through workaholism.
Absolutely.
Which isn't good. Yeah. It is a holism, it's not, but it's probably better than heroin.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Sure. Being a workaholic is better than an alcoholic for sure.
Yeah. But it's not without its problems as well. So
look what happens. For instance, when he found out that John was assassinated, he was working with George Martin on Tug of War, and he just, because you could imagine how that hit him. And I know there's the whole story about the reporter going, "Oh, you hear about John? Yeah, it's a drag." And of course, he was crucified because he said it was a drag. So you could imagine how overwhelmed this guy was. I mean, this was his partner. They loved each other, even though, they split up and they had some falling out here and there. So what did he do? He went right into the studio and he continued working on Tug of War. So that was his way of dealing with it. Yeah. And as a result, he took perhaps the pain and the anguish and he turned it into something positive and creative, is how I look at that, which I think is really a beautiful thing, because Tug of War, I think, is one of his best LPs, actually.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's also how he coped with his father's death as well, by working. And we also know that he coped with his mother's death through the guitar as well. So I think that's probably where it all began.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't allowed to, at 14 years old, wasn't allowed to grieve his own mother's death. So if his way of coping was through music, then I mean that's going to set a precedent for the rest of
Sure.
his life, that's how he's going to react in those situations, which we can see play out, for the rest of his life.